Right, I've just started the recording. So thank you for joining us this evening. I was expecting there'd be probably a few less on this evening as the weather is glorious yet again. I can't believe I'm saying that after the winter we've had, but it's lovely and sunny again. But thank you for joining us. And tonight we have Bruce talking to us on a very different topic to what we've probably used to having. Instead of a more practical topic on something linked to improving your performance wellness, but this will still link and help improve your performance, but it's very difficult in very different in not silage making or nutrition. This is actually how can you reduce your fuel usage by better machinery maintenance. So I heard Bruce at the Low Carbon Ag show and thought he'd be a really good guy to share his knowledge with you guys, because you may think lots of it is very sort of obvious, but actually I think a lot of it people forget about looking at. So I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Bruce. He can introduce the companies that he works for and share his knowledge with you. So if anyone has got any questions as we go through, do put them in the chat, and then there'll be time for questions as usual at the end. So over to you, Bruce.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. Evening, everybody. Thank you for joining and giving up the sun and silage or whatever else we have the opportunity to do in this beautiful weather. So as Katie said, we're going to do things a little bit differently on this one. The focus is mostly going to be on tyres, tyre technology, and choosing the right tyres, and then how we optimize that to support you guys going forward and the services we offer. So we will talk about machinery as well, and because they're so intrinsically linked with each other. So you'll notice a name at the bottom that you've probably not seen before in agricultural tyre world as Yokohama TWS. So I'm going to start with a very quick company presentation just to explain what that means. We've been Yokohama for 9 months now. They took over what was Trelleborg Wheel Systems back in 2023, so last July, to give them a footing into the off-the-road industry. Yokohama is synonymous with motorsport, car, truck, and so on. They don't really have a huge presence in OTR. So they brought us along, and with us came the 4 brands that you're probably more familiar with. Trelleborg, our main brand, Mitas, again, those 2 are what we see on original equipment, and then Cultural Maximo, which is more what you'll find in the lower end of the replacement market. Ag, material handling, construction, 2-wheel, all of those brands, as well as our service brand, which is Interfit, which gives us the opportunity to fit tyres and support you over and above selling the tyre. The important part of our business is we sell you a tyre, that's when our job starts. We want to make sure we're doing things like this to optimize what that tyre does for you. Won't go into the industries we cover. If you need a tyre in agriculture, it's covered by us. I think it's important as well to quickly show the sustainability targets of our company, because sustainability is such an important thing at the moment, especially in farming in the UK with the new grants and so on. So you can see we've got some very, very strong targets that we're working at. We've just launched the first tyre completely made of recycled material. We're looking at reducing water consumption, reducing waste, reducing CO2 emissions. So it's not just the technology that we put into the field that we're looking at the whole process on how we can be more sustainable and more productive for you guys. So that's Yokohama done. So now we can move on to the brand that you'll probably know a lot more of, which is Trelleborg. I've called it optimization. Optimization is what we need to do to our machinery and to our tyres to get the best out of it. Too often we tend to assume that our machinery is being PDI'd with our local tractor dealer, therefore everything is sorted. We can roll it off the trailer and get to work. It's never the case, especially when it comes to tyres. The tyres will be delivered at a certain pressure. That pressure is made for transport. It's not ideal for when we go into the farm. And also, we don't always have the correct tyres fitted at the beginning when we are buying that tractor. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. So first thing is the machinery. So what tractor do you need? First, you've got to understand what your tractor's doing. So a smaller tractor loaded at 70% is actually going to use less fuel than a larger tractor loaded at 50% of its power. So we're encouraged more and more, machinery is getting bigger, implements are getting heavier. We're encouraged more and more to spend money on larger tractors, whereas actually, do we need to spend on that bigger tractor, or are we okay with the mid-range, the smaller horsepower tractor? Because running that at 70% of capacity is going to be much more fuel efficient than running a larger tractor at 50%. Then we need to understand what the application is. How much are we doing on the road? How much are we doing on the field? The tyre has a big difference in terms of road work and field work. And again, pressures become so important in terms of fuel usage there. And then we need to understand the soil type, conditions that we're working in. And that could be from field to field. It could be from location to location. But it's very, very key that we keep that in mind when we're choosing our machinery. Second one, as I said, alluded to earlier, implements are now getting much, much heavier, much, much bigger. So the weight of that implement needs to be taken in consideration when you're buying that machinery, and then when you're buying the tyres on top of that as well. This is an area that last time I was working in the UK, so I've been in Trelleborg for 11 years now. Went from the UK, went and worked in Europe for a few years and came back. Ballasting was a big topic of conversation early doors, and then it went away. But we're noticing more and more that it needs to become more of a question again. So ballasting is when we add additional weight, whether that's as a front linkage weight, whether it's wheel weights, whether it's water ballasting. Water ballasting, not so much anymore, especially not with the field conditions we've got over here. You see it a lot still in Africa when they're working on the hard desert grounds. So when we want to use ballast is to counteract whatever weight we're putting on the back of the machine. So whatever you put on the back, you have to put on the front to counteract it. What we tend to see is that they'll use ballast when they're working in the field to give them traction, which is good because it gives you good fuel efficiency. Then you leave the ballast when you go onto the road. And all that's doing is putting more and more power onto more and more weight onto your rear axle. So your tyres are having to work harder, your machine's having to work harder. You're going to be spending a lot more fuel. It's going to be taking you longer, and you're going to be wearing out the more expensive of the two tyres on your machinery. So we suggest using it when the power to rate ratio of the tractor is not enough. So if you need high traction, as we do at the moment, it's important to use ballast, or because it's unbalanced. As I said, whatever we put on the rear of the tractor, we have to put on the front. We try and avoid ballast as much as possible when we're in low torque applications, so drilling, seeding, spraying, because you want to take as much weight off the machine as possible. One, to give you a better soil compaction, but also to make sure that you're using less fuel. I think we're all pretty familiar with what the different parts of different ballasts are. So obviously we've got the front linkage and rear linkage ballast blocks, either as cast iron plates, which are nice and easy to be a lot more flexible when you're on the farm, or as the large slabs of concrete, or the boxes that we see on the front. Again, easy to transfer, much easier to get the balance right because you can extend them onto your front linkage. Wheel weights used to be more common than they are now. Now they tend to put a wheel weight on and leave it on, or they'll order one when they buy it. Wheel weights are actually better because they don't put all the weight, the additional weight, onto the axle. It is specifically on the two wheels. However, they are more expensive. They are more difficult to apply. They're more, it's a lot more difficult to take on and off, but they are quite good, especially if you're doing a lot of road transport, because they give you that extra traction as you're setting off, with the weight going specifically into the wheel. So we've mentioned it, how important it is. It's also very important that we don't exceed the maximum weight of the tractor or of the tyres. So I'll explain how we understand what that is on the tyres later on, but it's all well and good putting more and more weight onto a tractor to balance it out, but we still can't overload the axles. We can't overload what the tractor's capable of doing. Any extra weight that tractor is carrying is going to increase your fuel usage. We've got to get that weight ratio between 40 and 60%. You've probably heard of that before. That's how most tractors with no implements, no weight blocks, come off the shelf with a 40-60 split. So we put a drill on the back, we put a plough on the back, you have to counteract that with weight on the front. And the most important thing is whenever we put more weight, either add weight or remove weight from a tractor, we have to change the tyre pressures to make sure we get the optimum out of it for the application. A good way of understanding where your tractor is, we always say the tyre tells you the story. The tyre either tells you the story if it has a problem, or if there's a setup issue with the machine, the tyre will tell you, because you'll be able to see scorch marks, wear marks in uneven places. But also when you're in the field as well, it gives you an indication just at looking at what tread your machine's leaving behind. So we want a little bit of slip between the tyre and the soil, between about 10 and 15%. Most of your isobus systems will tell you what that is. If the skid's too high, you need to add ballast to the wheels. If it's too low, then we need to remove weight. And this is how you tell. Should have my bouncer here. So if you haven't, this is where we want to get to. So we have a nice imprint. You can see the lug shape. There's a little bit of skid in the middle. That means your machine is nicely ballasted. It's the right weight for the conditions of that soil. If we have a really clean cut, like you can see here, where I've seen it before, where you can still see the word trelleborg written in the soil, that means that you are overloading your machine. There's too much weight being put into the soil, which is then compacting your soil. If you've got too much weight going into the soil, you're going to be using too much fuel because your traction isn't optimized. And this is the worst case for using fuel. So if you just see scuff marks, it means you haven't got enough weight on there. The tractor is really struggling for traction. Therefore, you're using more and more power, more and more horsepower to try and get that. Therefore, you're spending more money, you're revving your engine higher, so you're not going to have a good longevity of that, and you're ultimately burning off some more fuel. So if it's insufficient, you get excessive wheel skid, you lose power, rapid wear of tyres, I didn't mention, more fuel consumption, lower productivity, and that's key. That everything that's written there is costing you money. Same on the other side. If you have excessive ballast, you get higher soil compaction, and this is the bit you can't see. I'll explain later on how the tyre pressures make a difference to that. But compacted soil is so harmful for crops, it's so harmful for fuel consumption, and it's so harmful for the environment. You lose power, increase fuel consumption, lower productivity, risk of overloading on the tyres. So you can see whether you've got too much ballast or not enough ballast, both scenarios will end up costing you money. So it's so important when we're speccing the tractors at the beginning that you understand what use that tractor is going to have and what you need to put onto it. As I said, tyre tells a story. So what you need to watch out for, if you see uneven wear on your front tyres, so it could be down the left-hand side or on the inside, it means the ballast is wrong. It could be that your tracking is out, or it could be simply that you're running at the wrong pressures. If you're seeing that uneven wear on the rear tyres, again, could be that your setup's wrong, more likely that your pressures are wrong. If you're getting a lot of vibration, we're using tractors more and more for doing extended road work than we used to. So if you're seeing vibration in road transport, could be the fact that you've got no front ballast. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people tend to leave it. It could be that the tyres haven't been mounted correctly, the wheels haven't been secured correctly. You'll be amazed how often that happens. Or it could be something to do with the geometry of the machine itself. Your tracking could be out, and so on. If you're struggling to get into a certain gear when you're in a four-wheel tractor, or you're getting very rapid wear on the front tyre, it means that the lead of the tractor is wrong. That means you've got the wrong front tyre to go with the rear tyre. So you are basically winding up your gearbox. If you're getting tyre slipping on the rim, it means that either the tyre hasn't been fitted correctly, or you're not using the correct rim for that tyre. So you're putting too much power through the tyre, then the rim's not able to cope with it. Every technical data book from every manufacturer will tell you what the suggested rim is to use with whatever tyre you want to use, and it's consistent across all the brands. Tearing, chipping to the lugs, abrasion to the inner sidewalls. Again, that's probably a tracking issue. It could be that your implement's not aligned properly. It could be that you're not quite in the furrow as you should be. And if you're seeing it on the rear tyres, again, you're getting insufficient ballast on the front, too big an implement attached to the rear, or your tyres are running at too high a pressure. So it's really key, especially when your tractor's been sat for a while. Have a look at the tyres, see what story they're telling you, and then when you go into the field, see what the imprint is, and it tells you everything you need to know about that setup of the tractor. Cannot stress this one enough. You have to regularly check the pressures to ensure the efficiency and preserve your tyres. I know it's so easy. I know it's easy for me to say, sat here, make sure you go out and put more pressure in when you go onto the road. Make sure you drop the pressures when you're doing extended field work. But it's so key to reducing fuel consumption. It saves you time, it saves you fuel, it saves you money, and most importantly, it's saving your soil, which means you're going to get better crop rotations. So, correct tyre choice. We've spoken about the machine, now we talk about the tyres. These are all the demands. This was a survey we did in Lama in 2021. These are all the demands that people came to us and said, this is what we want from a tyre. Support from us, return on investment, low road noise, traction, high load carrying capacity, stability on roads, suitable for variable pressures, increased profit. It's so much that we've got to think of. Fundamentally, it comes down to 3 things we need to know and 3 things we need to avoid. Very similar to what we discussed when we're choosing our machine. What's the application? What's the load? So we can give you the inflation pressure. We do not want to be overloading tyres, because rubber isn't meant to be overloaded. When it overloads, it gets hot and it breaks. We don't want to be using the wrong tools, and we don't want soil compaction. Tyres are the only link between that beautiful, wonderful, sexy tractor that you've got and the field or the farm. So it's so important that that is right. If that's not right, if you have the wrong tyre fitted or you have it at the wrong pressure, it doesn't matter what technology you've got in the tractor. It doesn't matter how much you spent on your tractor is not going to perform efficiently. So the tyres are so important when you're picking your to make sure that you have an efficient farming. On the road, they've got to be hard. You want high pressure with low wear. The only way to get that is with high pressure. On the field, they've got to be supple and soft, good traction, only available at low pressure. So as I said before, it's so important that when we're moving from field to road, we're putting pressure into our tyres before we do road work, and we're taking it out when we go into the field. Overinflation in the field, we've talked about it, similar story with the ballasting. We get excessive slippage. We lose tractor energy. That's costing you money. That's costing you fuel. We're increasing the wear rate. You have to replace your tyres quicker. You're increasing soil compaction. That is damaging any crop that's in there and also damaging the environment. Similar story when you're on the road. Higher rolling resistance, because if you've got underinflated tyres, you've got more rubber in contact with the ground, so you get this wallowing effect. So again, you're losing energy. You're having to use more fuel to propel your machine forward. Rubber, when it gets hot, tends to melt. So again, the more rubber you have in contact with the road that's moving, we call it brushing. When the lug heads go backwards and forwards, the more of that you've got, the more heat's generated. Therefore, your tyres will wear out quicker. And if you have too soft pressure on the road, the tyres will flex and crack more than they're capable of doing. Therefore, you're going to end up having sidewall separation inside your tyres. I'll go very quickly through this. I don't want to teach you how to suck eggs, but this is what is written on a tyre. Obviously, the brand name is incredibly important. Product name isn't. The size is key, but this little bit here, which is probably the most forgotten part of a tyre. It's on every tyre. Load index and speed symbol is fundamentally the most important number on that tyre. So 650 is the section width. Now, by the standards that exist is ETRTO, 650 is from this radial bulge here to this radial bulge here, which is why you'll find a 650, dependent on brand, will look very, very different lined up against each other. The premium brand's 650 is the tread. So when you're in this position, you're getting the maximum tread onto the ground. Whereas with some of the cheaper brands, you won't be getting the full 650 onto the ground. 65 is the percentage of the height. So that is 65% of 650. R stands for radial. 38 is your rim diameter here. I have no idea why it's in millimeters, percentage and inches. I think it's someone somewhere has just decided that this is the way it should be done, and it's good fun to annoy everybody and ask a question every time. But it's the same if you look at your car tires, truck tires, everything. It goes millimeters, percentage, and then inches. And then we get onto this one, this 157D. 157 tells you what load you can carry, and D tells you what speed you can carry that load at. So 157 is just over 4 ton. That's 4 ton per tire. And then D means up to 65 kilometers an hour. So this tire in nominal conditions, again, we can carry 4 ton up to 65k. Again, every manufacturer will have this at the back of their technical book. This is the speed, this is the load index. So you'll see a lot of 168A8, so 168 load index, just over 5.5 ton, 5.6 ton, A8 at 40k. You could also find, for instance, a 165D. So 165 load index carries just over 5 ton, D 65k. But then in brackets, it might say 170E. So 170 means actually that same tyre, sorry, it won't say 170, it will say 158. That same tyre can carry 4.2 ton at 70k. So weight and speed very, very much go hand in hand. If you want to carry more weight, you have to reduce your speed. If you want to go faster, you have to reduce your weight. So you'll see a lot of tyres will have this, and then in brackets they'll have another speed index, which is if you want to go faster, this is the maximum load you can carry. So again, always worth looking at. Every technical data book, I think I've got a snippet of one later, which I'll explain to you, has what pressure you should be running to carry what load at what speed. So it's very straightforward. This is one of my favorite slides and always has been. So you can see it's quite an old-fashioned one. This is what we have, what we call equivalent sizes. So each of these has an overall diameter of 1.95 m, which means that they can be used without messing with the gearbox. They are interchangeable tyres. What a lot of people get wound up on is this number here in terms of their size of the tyre, that 42. So remember, that's the diameter, excuse me, of your rim. I've got a 42-inch tyre, therefore I've got a big tyre. Not necessarily. It's the total number here. So if you have 650, 65, 42, if you go to 710, 70, 38, look at the space here and here compared to this. That space is air volume. The more air volume you've got, the more load you can carry and the lower pressure you can run those tyres, because you're able to carry more capacity because you're spreading that load over a wider area. So when you're speccing your tractor, speccing your machine, we have to look at the load index and the speed, but look at this total value here. You'll notice the 650, 65, 42 will probably have a 148 load index, whereas the 710, 70, 38 will probably be near a 160, 170. So the load index tells you, but it's also, don't get hung up on that 42 inch. This used to be a very popular tyre. this is now a much better fitment. It's a little bit more expensive, not hugely on new tractors, but it gives you so much more flexibility with what you can do with that machine. There is technology out there to help. So you've probably seen these letters banded about on various tyre brands. Again, these are industry standards worldwide. IF is increased flexion. That means you can carry 20% more load at the same pressure, or you can carry the same load at up to 20% less pressure. So it gives you, again, more flexibility. VF is replacing IF really, because that gives you 40% more load carrying capacity at the same pressure, or same pressure up to 40% less. And then these two are more for harvesting operations, CHO and CFO. So that means they can carry a higher load for a short space of time. So as your hopper's getting bigger, getting fuller, it can carry that load for a short space of time before it's then emptied. So to give you an example, this is, again, 710 7042 common fitment in 3 different versions. Standard, which is our TM900, IF TM1000 HP, and VF TM1000 PT. So if we want to carry 5.5 ton, we want to carry 5 ton. The TM900, you need to be at 1.6 bar to carry 5.5 ton. The TM1000 IF, you can drop that down to 1 bar. So already significant drop in pressure, which gives you longer footprint, wider footprint, less sole compaction, better fuel efficiency, everything that we've already talked about. But on the VF at 1 bar, you can carry 5.5 ton. So again, you're able to carry so much more weight, but you're still keeping that low pressure. If you want to carry 5.5 ton on a standard tire, you've got to put 1.6 bar in. And all that does is shrink your footprint down. So you're putting more compaction into the soil, you're getting less traction, increasing your fuel usage. This is what I mentioned. This is the technical data book. This is what tells you the rim that it should be fitted on. It can also be fitted on this. You can see it's the same on most of them. And then this is the load: high torque work, low torque work, 10K, 20K, 30K, 40 to 65. Again, you'll notice on IF and VF, you have this single line for 40 to 65, whereas with the standard technology, it's split out 40, 50, 65, and then up to 70. So 8.5 ton, up to 65 kilometers an hour on a VF tire, you need to put 2 bar in. So that's how you read these books. But again, you know, any tire manufacturer will be there to support you, and we offer an optimization service where we'll come and explain this to you, weigh your tractors, talk you through the benefits of it, talk you through what pressures you should be running depending on what job you're doing, and make sure that you're set up and good to go to be as efficient as possible. There is another big piece of technology that exists that helps with this. This is unique to us as Trelleborg. It's called progressive traction. It is this secondary lug, which you may have seen at shows or may even have on your machine. It has three effects. The first one is it gives you extra traction in the ground. So it lifts the tire out of the ground. So you're not having to work as hard to get the traction, therefore reducing slippage, therefore better fuel efficiency. It also, I mentioned, because it's a wider lug base here, you get less brushing on the road, therefore you're not generating as much heat, therefore it wears longer, and reduces your fuel consumption. And then it's another angle. So you'll have seen over the years what used to be Pirelli back in the 90s is still consistent with Trelleborg tread now, these interlug terraces. They're there, so when the tire rotates, it flexes. And as it flexes, those angles crack the mud. So they keep these areas nice and clear, because as soon as these get full up, as they are doing very often at the moment with the horrible weather we've been having, these turn into slicks, and then you're losing your traction, you're using more fuel. That's why another important point on getting the pressure right. If the pressure is too high, these will fill up. the interlock terraces won't work because the tyre needs to rotate. As it rotates, it gets flatter at the bottom, flexes, and then pops back out again. That's what gives the movement to crack the lugs. This extra progressive traction gives you another angle that flexes and rotates to keep your tyre nice and clean. Other important factor when it comes to choosing your correct tyres is if they are running out, replace them. So always check your tyres for excessive wear and low tread depth. I'm not saying that because I work for a tyre company, I want you to buy more tyres. The lower, if your tyres are on the limit, they are starting to cost you money because you're not getting the optimized traction. You're not getting the good wear on the road. You're not getting good contact. So you will be using more and more fuel. So if they're ever below the recommended levels, replace them as soon as possible. Make sure we're looking after that fuel consumption. Last section I want to talk about is how we protect the soil. So we talked earlier, we've talked about ballasting, we've talked about tyre pressures, we've talked about the setup. So these are all the tangible things. Get your tyre pressures right, get your ballast right. It saves you money. You will be able to see that on your systems. You'll be able to see your fuel economy going down. You'll know that you're getting around the fields quicker and you're being more efficient. This is the bit that you don't see. This is the soil. This is the effect that tyre pressures have on our soils. So if we have too lower tyre pressure, the carcass buckles in on itself. So you can see there's a lot of heavy pressure going on the outside and the inside isn't really doing anything. So you're putting too much stress on the carcass. That's going to cause it to fail no matter what tyre brand it is. And it means that you're not getting the traction that you need to get in the field. If you have too high a pressure, so this is what you might see when you're on the road, if you don't change it when you go into the field, you can see what a small contact area you've got and how where it's red, it's a very high pressure going into the ground. This is what we see more than anything else, is that because it's either arrived after the PDI from the machine dealer, therefore you've taken it off on its delivery pressures and you've just gone straight to work with it. That first pass in a field is where the damage is done. And then it's not only that initial damage, but then the cost of having to dig that back out again next season or at the end of the season is significantly more the more compacted the soil is. This is what we want to get to. You can see nice length, nice width, nice and even pressure. It means you're not putting any stress through the tyre. It means you're getting it as full a footprint as possible in contact with the ground. Therefore, you're able to maximize your traction, minimizing your fuel consumption and increasing your time. The more contact area we have in the ground, the easier that machinery is to move, and therefore you're going to save time. There's two different aspects. So there's the width of the footprint and there's the length of the footprint. So the width of the footprint means better traction, lower soil compaction, lower carbon emissions. And this is what we talk about when we talk about soil. This is a compacted soil. Again, the UK soil is not in good health. This is quite common. This is what we want to see. If you've got low soil compaction, it means you're not disturbing the soil structure. That means the soil's able to do, the soil is a living organism. It's able to live, it's able to produce, it's able to break things down, it's able to do what it needs to do to nourish your crops. Yes, we have issues with drainage at the moment, and yes, we've had a ridiculous amount of weather, but also soil compaction hasn't helped with the flooding that we've seen in fields because that rainwater can't penetrate into the soil. So we do a really nice thing, I think I'll an image of it later, where we put a scaffold pole into a footprint of a high pressure and a low pressure, and we fill it with water. And then I talk to you about this presentation as we are doing. And by the time I've finished, the one on high pressure is still full of water, and the low pressure one, the water's all disappeared. That is a very visual demonstration of what we're showing here. And don't forget, if that rainwater sat on the top of the surface, it's going to wash off. It's going to take your soil with you, which is one of your most important assets, and it's going to take all your chemicals into the local waterways, and then you've got Environment Agency on your case as well. Low soil compaction I mentioned means we've got optimum development of biomass, which is so key to the development of whatever crops you put in there. We're not releasing as much carbon into the atmosphere, which is such a key thing at the moment. It means the nutrients and the oxygen that all comes down from the weather can be taken straight down into the crops. All of your herbicides and pesticides and everything that you put on to feed your crops can go to the roots. But if it's compacted, they just stand on the surface and you don't go anywhere. So, as I said, 650, 65, 38, quite a common tyre fitment, 1.6 bar, 100% working surface. Just by dropping that to 0.8. Again, it depends on what you're doing, but this is carrying 3.2 tons, so 6.5 tons across the rear axle. You can get a 36% larger working surface by dropping your pressures. And as we said, larger working lug surface, the more you have in touching the field, the better traction that you have. Better traction reduces fuel economy, reduces fuel usage and saves you time. Again, same tyres, total footprint. So this first one, we just look at the amount of lug surface that's in contact. This one, we're now looking at the total footprint area. So 54% larger footprint area. That is saving your soil. It's like the high-heeled shoe and the elephant's foot. High-heeled shoe on your foot is going to hurt like hell. An elephant can walk on your foot and you hardly notice it because it spreads its weight over so much more of an area. So I mentioned this one again. The wider the tyre footprint, the higher the traction. The lower the soil compaction, the lower the carbon emissions. This is the experiment I showed you. You can see, hopefully on that image, this is the correct tyre pressure. This is incorrect. You can see how much smaller it is, but also look how much you can see the imprints of the lug, whereas this one's all crumbly and nice. Going back to what we said earlier about the tyre tells you what it's doing. High compaction, low water penetration, low compaction, high water infiltration. When we did this demo, we set it up on a beautiful Friday night. It was gorgeous sunshine in Norfolk, and then it rained constantly all weekend. And we came back and weren't sure what was going to be presented to us, but you can see it told the story even better because the water just sat there on the high compaction and it all drained away on the low compaction. And then this is something we did with agronomist, where we had two parts of a field. And we dug up the crop at the end of the season, and you can see this was the low compaction. Look how nice, healthy and long, up to sort of 36 centimetre root growth. And this was the high compaction. That was running at 1.6 bar. This was running at 0.8. You can see that's your yield. Nothing there is going to be healthy, whereas this will give you everything. All the nutrients can get straight down into those roots and give you a really healthy crop. So what is an optimization? An optimization is to give you all of this. This is what you want from your machine. You want engine performance, fuel efficiency, you want good speed, you want good handling. You need to have your 40-60 ballast that we talked at the beginning. You need to reduce your tyre failures. You need to reduce your soil compaction. You need your tyres to last a long time, and you want comfort when you're driving it. So this is the service that we offer, that we'll come out to you and we'll do this optimization for you. We'll weigh your tractors with whatever implements you have. It's called, it's part of a service that we call Premium Care. You can sign up online and the local ASM will give you a call. And we come out and we can spend an hour with you, or we can spend a day with you, depending on how many machines you've got, how many implements you've got. Because for the machine to work at its best, the tyres have to be right. For our tyres to work at their best, they have to be right. So we want to make sure that we're providing that service so that the money that you've spent on that tractor, you're getting the absolute most out of it. So as a quick conclusion, when we talk about optimizations, consider ballasting to make sure you get a better load distribution. It adds weight to the tractor, so you're getting efficient transfer of horsepower to the ground, reduce tyre slippage and fuel consumption. But don't forget, the tyre tells you the story. Look at what imprint you're leaving on the ground. We want to keep ballasting to a minimum because of soil compaction, and we want to not carry as much weight as possible. So we want to really it's so important that you have that balance between 60 on the rear, 40 on the front, without too much weight. So the type and size of the tyres have to be approved for the tractor in line with your requirements. So what are you doing? If you buy a stock tractor, it might not have the right tyre for what you want your machine to do. It might have a certain size tyre, which is great, but as soon as you put a weight block on it, or as soon as you put a plough on it or a drill, that tyre is not up to capacity to be able to handle the workload that you want to do it. So when you're talking with your machine dealers, make sure you'll tell them exactly what you want that machine to do, how heavy your equipment is, so they can make sure you're getting the right tyre. Don't assume they know.
Bruce, can I just ask a question?
Of course.
If you're using controlled traffic farming, is it less critical to vary the tyre pressure between field and road?
No, because it's the first pass in a field is where the damage is done. So even if you're doing controlled traffic, that first pass, if your pressures are too high, you've damaged your soil that first time. It doesn't matter if you go in another 5 or 6 or 10 times, that damage has been done on the first run. So it's still very, very important to change the tyre pressures.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Make sure the tyre you're selecting has got the sufficient load capacity. So we talked about the load index and the speed rating. Make sure that that is in line with your expectations. Know what implements you're doing so that you can make sure the tyre is good enough. And don't forget as well, if you are ploughing, moving the plough from one side to other. So when you turn on a headland, you're probably shifting about 1.5 tons worth of weight just from moving the plough from one side to the other. So that could mean that on that turn, when you're putting pressure, a high load and high pressure onto that one tyre, that tyre could be overloading. So again, something to be very, very mindful of. And that's why we'd always suggest you go for a larger tyre to give you that more flexibility so you can run it at the lower pressures. Make sure your rims are suitable for your tires and they're in good working conditions. You know, rims get scuffed, they get damaged, they get bent, they get all kinds of chips on them. Make sure that there's no air leakage and make sure that they're in good condition, because otherwise you are going to have a problem with your tire. Make sure that the tire size is in line with the application. And it sounds really silly, but actually we talk about going bigger and bigger with tires to give you the flexibility, but make sure that the overall width of your machine can still fit through your gate posts. We have had it in the past where we've convinced a guy to go for a bigger tire to give him a better footprint, better flexibility, and then he's realized he can't actually get into his field because his tractor was bigger than he thought as well. So that was fun. Make sure you're not mixing cross-ply and radial. To be honest, you don't see that very often now anyway. And make sure that you're not mixing brands up on the same axle. So don't have a Trelleborg on your rear left and a Mittas on your rear right. You shouldn't really be mixing brands front and rear either, because the overall diameter of different brands will differ, as we talked about earlier, and that could mess with your gearbox. So you should try and keep a consistent brand throughout. But if you do have to change, make sure that the same axles have the same tyres on. And as I mentioned before, if the rims are deformed, rusty, or there's any damage to them, get them replaced as well. I think that's it, guys.
I've got another question. How much weight per horsepower do you recommend for high torque situations as a rule of thumb?
There isn't one, I'm afraid. It's very dependent on what pressure you've got in the tyre, what the soil conditions are, what you're doing. My suggestion is, if you've got one of our tyres, fantastic, give us a ring and let's talk it through on a case-by-case basis. If not, talk to your local rep for the whatever tyre brand it is, and they'll come and help you, I'm sure.
Okay, and another question has just come in. Is a more expensive tyre always better? If not, what should I consider as best value for money?
So how do I answer this one politically correct? With a more expensive tyre, you are getting better technology in the tyre. So again, it very much depends on what you're doing. If your machine is just a farm runaround, hopefully no one is going to see this for my company, but there is no point in buying a Trelleborg tyre, because you are spending money on technology that you don't need. You are better to buy a mid-range tyre like a Mitas, or even a budget tyre like a Cooltour or a Maximo that we've got in our range. So that's the reason we have 3 different ranges. Your tier 1 is for typically for your high horsepower, where you need the technology. You want the flexibility of good long use, the progressive traction technology that we talked about, giving you the optimum traction, but also the service that comes with, the setup service we talked about, the premium care service, all the backups that you get. When we sell a tyre, and it will be the same on any premium brand, that's day one of us doing our jobs. We're not here just to sell tyres. We're here to sell a complete service for you. So again, it's dependent on your need and requirement. It's not necessarily that the most expensive tyre are the best tyres as they are written in front of you, but they're not necessarily the best tyre for what you want the machine to do. So again, it's talking to your local tyre guy. It's talking to us as manufacturers to say, this is what I want to do with the tractor. Do I need a Trelleborg? Do I need a Mitas? Or do I need a Cooltour? And we will tell you which one is best depending on the use of that tyre. But if you want technology and you want the best fuel efficiency and you want the best traction, then absolutely you need to pay the money for the premium brands. Are you on mute, Katie?
I am, sorry.
Sorry.
Is the 60-40 weight split? No, the 60-40 weight split, is this with implement raised or on the ground?
This is with, so the 60-40 weight split needs to be on when it's raised, because that's what you're going to be doing when you're taking it to and from. But remember, when it's on the ground, you're transferring some of that load onto the front axle, which is fine. But when you're using that implement, the weight that you're saving from putting it into the ground, you're making up again because of the torque that you're getting from the field. So it's actually the same, if that makes sense. So implement on the ground takes the weight to the front axle. When it then goes in the ground and starts working, you're getting more force being put onto that implement, therefore more load. And then when it's raised, you're taking that load off out of the ground. So it works out pretty much the same.
Okay. And what's the most appropriate tyre on a mixed farm doing yard, road work and some field work, but with limited arable?
I would suggest a Mitas in terms of a brand. In terms of a size, obviously it very depends on the tractor and horsepower and so on. But for what you've suggested there, a mid-range tyre will probably be sufficient.
Okay, that's all the questions we've got at the moment. I'll let you carry on.
I'm done.
You're done. You're done. So has anyone else got any other questions? If anyone wants to ask a question themselves, then raise your hand and just unmute and ask away. Or if there's no other questions, give you another minute I'll wrap up whilst and see if anything else comes in. But no, thank you, Bruce, for sharing your expert knowledge with us this evening. And I think even though it's a very different topic, I think it's such a valuable one that actually everybody needs to make sure they get the tyre pressures right for whether it's field, road, whatever. And I definitely love and I'll remember the high heel versus the elephant comment. I like that one, definitely.
Yeah.
There has just been another question come in. Any comment on trailer tyres?
In what respect?
I guess it. Do you want to unmute, Mike, and ask the question? I guess is it pressures of the trailer tyres, or is that?
Okay, Bruce. Yeah, really.
Hi.
I mean, obviously, super singles are popular for down the road. A bit of an issue in the field. Is there a compromise to be had there, or do we just need to go full out floaties and bite the bullet in terms of price?
Yeah, so the flotations will help massively. You can get a lot more flexibility in them now, and they do now come in VF as well, which the same technology we talked about on the tractor tires, which gives you that little bit more flexibility, so you are able to go straight in and out. Super singles in a field are just bad, unfortunately. So it doesn't really matter what you've done with the tractor in terms of the setup. If you then take super singles over the top of it, you're going to undo some of the work that you've done on the tractor setup. So I would suggest flotations where you can. Again, there are 3 different options. You've got your tier 1 expensive ones, you've got your mid-range, and you've got your budgets. Again, if you want to make sure you're getting most out of the field, I wouldn't go anything under a mid-range tire. So again, Mitas has got an Agritera, very good. It's fitted on OE on a lot of machines. It gives you a good wide footprint, and it's a nice contact area on the road as well. And if you ever look at having a retrofit CTIS system, so central tire inflation system, similar to what Fendt have got with the VarioGrip, you can get retrofit ones. The retrofit ones also go into the trailer tires as well. So again, it means that you can have that flexibility on your trailer tires, which you wouldn't get if you're running super singles.
Is that okay, Mike?
Yeah. And there's not a magic answer. It's a lower the better, I suppose, all the time. But is there a tire pressure we should be trying to aim at?
No, it's so dependent on weight and machine, I'm afraid. If there was a magic wand, I would love to tell you what tire pressure you should be running at.
Yeah, no, I've meant in terms of the soil really, rather than the machine that we've got. Obviously, yeah, it's totally dependent on how big the machine is, but in terms of this, keeping the soil health right and trying not to cause too much compaction. Do we have to aim? Do we want to be aiming at 20 psi, or can we? Is 40 sort of okay? At what point does the damage really start to escalate?
So the damage gets worse from about 1.6 bar onwards. So I'm not sure what that is in. Hang on, let me grab my technical data book here.
Be about 22 psi, will it?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, you want to be around between 14 and 17 is great for the soil. Any less than that, you need to have VF technology to be able to do that. But once you get up to sort of 22, you're starting to cause a bit of damage. The difficulty is when you get to 22 is it's the depth of the damage. So it's not necessarily what you see on the surface, it's actually how far down that compaction goes. Whereas when you're running at a lower pressure, the damage you do is much more superficial. As soon as you go above 22, that damage goes so much deeper. And then, as I said, it's a much more expensive task then to undo it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Yeah. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Fab. Well, if there's no further questions, I'll let you all go and enjoy the rest of your evening. But thank you very much, Bruce, for sharing your knowledge. I've definitely learned a lot more about tyres than I ever knew before. And I hope everybody's found some useful information which you can go back and look at your tyres, whether it's checking that you've got the same brands on front and back as a starter for 10, and then obviously going to check what pressures you actually need. So thank you very much again, Bruce, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bruce.